Today, however, we have our Jewish Tall Tales tea. This is the final tea in our summer series. We did multicultural stories, stories from around the world, maybe things that you've heard before, maybe things that you hadn't. Today we have Jewish Tall Tales. And our presenter is Judy Sima. She is the president of the Detroit Story League, and she is one of Michigan's favorite storytellers. Since 1983, she has told stories at conferences, festivals, schools, libraries, throughout the state and across the country. Her book, Raising Voices, Creating Youth Storytelling Groups and Troops, has received numerous awards and accolades, and she's also featured in the award-winning DVD series Story Watchers Club and the August House Book of Scary Stories. So please help me welcome Judy Sima.
Thank you. Just a little bit lower so I can see you all. Well, it's wonderful to be here. I want to thank Stephanie for inviting me. I'm just going to play with this a little bit more so I don't trip over the... Is that okay? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't want to trip over... Here we go. Okay, I don't want to trip over the leg here. So it's wonderful to be here, and I want to thank Stephanie for inviting me. And I would like to share some stories with you, some tall tales from the Jewish tradition. There is a song that is sung at every Passover Seder, and Jewish children learn to sing the chorus almost as soon as they can talk. And it goes like this. Die, Dayenu, die, Dayenu, die, Dayenu, 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 which means it would be enough, it is sufficient. The song itself starts off, it's a song that has 15 stanzas, and it's a song of praise and thanksgiving, thanking God for taking us out of the land of Egypt, where we were slaves, and bringing us to the land of Israel. And the first stanza goes like this. Ilu hotzi hotzianu hotzianu mi Mitzrayim hotzianu mi Mitzrayim dayenu. And I'll be singing this a lot so you can sing along if you want to. Die, Dayenu, die, Dayenu, die, Dayenu, 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 die, Dayenu, die, Dayenu, die, Dayenu, Dayenu, Dayenu. And you can see why the kids like to sing it. Now the song, as I said, has 15 stanzas, but I've kind of combined a few so that you can get an idea of what the song is about. It starts off, if God would have taken us out of the land of Egypt, but not had us cross the Red Sea, has not divided the sea for us, it would have been sufficient. Dayenu. If he would have opened the sea for us, but not drowned our oppressors, it would have been sufficient. Dayenu. If he would have drowned our oppressors, but not given us manna in the desert, it would have been sufficient. If he had given us manna in the desert so that we could survive, but not given us the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, the 10 Commandments, our scripture, it would have been sufficient. If he would have given us the Torah, but not brought us to the land of Israel, it would have been sufficient. Die, Dayenu, die, Dayenu, die, Dayenu, 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 die, Dayenu, die, Dayenu, die, Dayenu, Dayenu, Dayenu. The first story I wanted to tell you was a story that kind of illustrates the importance of Dayenu in the Jewish tradition. It's a story told about the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Israel ben Eliezer. The Baal Shem Tov means the master of the good name, and he was one of the most important rabbis in Jewish history. He was the one that created the ultra-Orthodox sect of Hasidim. And the Baal Shem Tov lived in the Ukraine in the early 1700s. And he was a very important rabbi, and whenever there was some danger, the people of his village would come to him and ask him to absolve them of this danger, to dissipate the danger. And so this is one story that is told about him, and it comes from Elie Wiesel's book, The Gates of the Forest. Now, there was a terrible misfortune that was going to befall the Jewish people in his village. They came to the Baal Shem Tov and they said, please, you must pray for us. You must intercede with God. We hear that the Russian Cossacks are on their way. They are pillaging and burning down and killing people in all the shtetls, all the Jewish villages throughout the area. Please pray for us. And the Baal Shem Tov went into the forest, and he lit a special fire, and he said a special prayer, and the danger was averted. Dayenu, it was sufficient. After many generations, the rabbi of that village had another danger coming to the Jewish people of that area. The people came to him and said, Rabbi, you must intercede for us. You must pray to God, because we hear that there is a terrible smallpox epidemic, and it is working its way toward our village. And the rabbi said, well, I no longer know how to light and build that special fire, but I know the place in the forest, and I know the special prayer, and it will have to be sufficient. It'll have to be enough. And it was. The danger was averted. The epidemic changed because the weather changed, it grew colder, and the danger was averted. Many more generations passed, and another danger happened. And they came to the rabbi at that time and said, Rabbi, we hear that there is a war in Russia, and that they're coming from village to village, and they're taking our sons and making them join the Russian army. Please, we hear that if anybody goes into the army, he is never seen or heard from again. Please pray for us. And the rabbi said, well, I no longer know how to build that fire. I don't know the prayer anymore, but I know the place in the forest. And he went to that place in the forest, and it was sufficient. It was enough. The war ended. There was peace in the land, and they no longer needed Jewish conscriptions. After another couple of generations, it fell upon Rabbi Israel of Rezun to avert the danger for the Jews. It was said that the Russians were coming, and they were evacuating people from all of the villages and making them live in big cities. And some people were going to America, some were going to Poland. Their home was going to be destroyed. And so they went to the rabbi. He said, Rabbi, please pray for us. This is our home. We don't want to leave. And Rabbi Israel said, I no longer know how to build that fire. I don't know the prayer. I don't even know the special place in the forest. But I can tell about the story. It'll have to be sufficient. And it was. Dayenu, it was sufficient. Now, this next story is what I call a noodlehead story. There are many noodlehead stories throughout folklore. It's about a bumpkin or somebody that's not too bright, a simpleton, who bumbles around life, but somehow things always work out for him in the end. And he usually marries the king's daughter. This is my version of a Jewish version of it. There was once a boy named Shmuley. Shmuley and his mother lived on the edge of a shtetl, a little Jewish village. They were very poor. And even though Shmuley would have liked to have gone to cheder, which is school, and studied the holy books, he was so poor that he had to go to work every day just to put food on the table. But Shmuley was a mensch, a good person. He did everything his mother told him to do, and he worked very hard. To tell you the truth, people said Shmuley was one candle short of a Hanukkah menorah. But he worked hard, and he was a good boy. Now, every day when Shmuley went to work, he had to pass the rabbi's house. The rabbi was the most important person in the village. He lived right in the middle of the shtetl with the shul, or the synagogue, on one side, and the cheder, the school, on the other side. And whenever Shmuley walked by, the rabbi's daughter would be sitting on the porch. She would be knitting or sewing or reading a book. And Shmuley always smiled at the rabbi's daughter and waved at her. But the rabbi's daughter never smiled, and she never waved back. Well, on Monday, Shmuley went to work for Moshe the tailor. He picked up the pins, he swept the tailor shop, he wrapped up the bolts of fabric and put them neatly back on the shelf. And when he was done, Moshe said, Shmuley, you do good work. For your pay today, I'm going to give you a kopek. And he handed Shmuley a bright copper coin. Shmuley put the coin in his hand and said, thank you so much. With this kopek, my mother can buy a trout or maybe some carp and make gefilte fish. And he began to leave the tailor's house. And as he walked home, he had to cross over a bridge. And when he got onto the bridge, when he stepped on the bridge, he looked behind him to see if the rabbi's daughter was sitting on her porch. And he stumbled, and that kopek flew out of his hand, up into the air, and into the swift-flowing stream below the bridge. When he got home, his mother said, "Nu, Shmuley, did you get paid today?" And Shmuley said, "Yes, Moshe the tailor gave me a kopek." "Oh, very good," said his mother. Can I see it?" "Well, I crossed the bridge and I tripped and it fell into the water," said Shmuley. Shmuley's mother put her hands against her head and said, "Oy vey, Shmuley, you've got a lochenkopf. Oh no, Shmuley, you've got a hole in your head." You want to try that with me? Oy vey, Shmuley, you've got a lochenkopf. Now you have to say it with a little more sound. Let's try it again. Lochenkopf. Good. You're very good. All right. You've got a lochenkopf. Don't you know, if someone gives you a kopek, you should put it in your pocket to keep it safe. "That's a good idea," said Shmuley. "I'll do that the next time." Well, on Tuesday, Shmuley went to work for Nachman, the goat seller. And he milked the goats, he swept the drek, the poop, up from the goat yard, he mended the fence, and when he was done, the goat seller Nachman said, "Shmuley, you did good work today. For your pay, I'm going to give you this bucket of goat milk." "Oh, good," said Shmuley. "With this bucket of milk, my mother can make cheese to eat with onions and pickles." And he picked up the bucket of milk, and he left the farmyard, and as he started going home, he remembered what his mother had told him. And so he very carefully opened up the pocket of his pants and slowly poured the milk into his pocket. It dribbled into his pants, down to his underwear, and into his shoe, down his pants. And when he got home, he was kind of a damp mess. And his mother said, "Shmuley, did you get paid today?" And Shmuley said, "Yes, Nachman gave me this bucket of milk." And his mother looked at the empty bucket and she said, "Where's the milk?" "Well, I did what you told me to do, Mama. I put it in my pocket to keep it safe, but I must have had a hole in my pocket because it went down into my shoes." Oy vey, Shmuley, you've got a lochenkopf. Don't you know that if someone gives you some milk, you should balance it on your head and hold it with your hand to keep it from falling? "That's a good idea," said Shmuley. "I'll do that the next time." Well, the next day, Shmuley went to work for Yenta, the matchmaker. Now, while Shmuley was working, Yenta made schmaltz. She took the fat from several chickens that she had cooked, and she put it into a frying pan, chopped up some onions, and cooked it till the onions were cooked and the schmaltz was nice and clear. Then she poured the whole thing into a bowl, set it down on a block of ice for it to get cold and to get solid. While she was making the schmaltz, Shmuley was out chopping wood for her oven. He was raking the leaves and washing the windows. And when he was done, Yenta said, "Shmuley, you did good work today. I'm going to give you some of the schmaltz to take home to your mama." Oh, Shmuley loved schmaltz. He liked to spread it on his challah and on his bagels. And so Yenta wrapped some of the schmaltz into a cloth, and Shmuley left the house. But as he began going home, he thought about what his mother had said, and so he very carefully put it on top of his head, held it with one hand to keep it balanced. It was a hot day. The sun beat down on his head, and pretty soon the schmaltz was melting and dripping into his mouth and into his ears. It came down his arm and into his armpit. And when he got home, his mother said, "Shmuley, did you get paid today?" "Yes, Yenta gave me some schmaltz." And he handed her the greasy rag. And she said, Oy vey, Shmuley, you've got a Lachenkopf. Don't you know that you're supposed to take schmaltz and cool it in the stream to keep it nice and cold and solid? That's a good idea, said Shmuley. I'll do that the next time. Well, the next day he went to work for Joseph, the chicken seller. He picked up the eggs, he put fresh hay under the chickens, he picked up all the dreck, all the poop, and when he was done, Joseph said, Shmuley, you do good work. For your pay today, I'm going to give you this chicken. Oh, chicken, that's wonderful, said Shmuley. My mother can make chicken, so it's been a long time since we've had chicken for Shabbos dinner. And he took the chicken and he began going home. But when he got to the bridge, he remembered what his mother had told him. And so very carefully, he dunked the chicken in the water, back and forth and back and forth, and the poor chicken was squawking and flapping its wings. Shmuley kept dunking it in the water till it was half dead. And when he got home, he said, Here, Mother, here's what I got paid with today. And his mother looked at the chicken and said, Oy vey, Shmuley, you've got a Lachenkopf. Tomorrow, when you get paid, never mind. When you get paid tomorrow, don't put it in your pocket. Don't balance it on your head. Don't drown it in the river. If somebody pays you tomorrow, just put it on your shoulder to keep it safe. Put it on your shoulder to keep it safe. I'll do that tomorrow, said Shmuley. That's a good idea. The next day, Shmuley went to work for Tevye, the dairyman. He milked the cows. He gave them fresh food to eat. He swept up all the dreck. And when he was done, Tevye said, Shmuley, you are a hard worker. Shmuley was a very hard worker. And for your pay today, I'm going to give you this old cow. Now, it doesn't give much milk, but it should be enough for you and your mama. Oh, I like milk with my breakfast, said Shmuley. And he began to lead the cow out of the barn when he remembered what his mother had told him. And so very carefully, he got in front of the cow, and he lifted up the cow's, one of its hind feet with over one shoulder, and then he picked up the left foot with the other, and he put it over the other shoulder, and he began going down the street carrying that cow. The cow's head was on top of Shmuley's head, and it was drooling into his ears and into his mouth and down his clothes. And every once in a while, the cow would give him a patch in the tush as he walked down the road. Now, just so happened, the rabbi's daughter was sitting on her porch. She was reading a book when she heard the cow mooing. She looked up. There was Shmuley coming down the road just as the cow gave him another punch in the tush. And she looked at him, and first she kind of stared. And then she kind of smiled. And then she started to giggle. And then she started to laugh, and she laughed so hard that tears were coming down her cheeks. The rabbi came out of the cheder, out of the school, to see what was the matter. And he said, What happened? What happened? And the rabbi's daughter just pointed and said, It's Shmuley. And the rabbi could see him dragging that poor cow down the street. And he ran over to Shmuley and he said, Shmuley, stop. Put down the cow. Listen to me. I am going to fill that Lachenkopf of yours with learning, with knowledge. Come tomorrow after synagogue. Come into my house, and I will teach you to read Hebrew and teach you how to study and learn the holy books. And so, after that, Shmuley came every day to the cheder. He learned how to read Hebrew. He learned to study the holy books. And in time, he became a scholar. He was wise and learned. And after a while, when he would come to the rabbi's house, he would smile at the rabbi's daughter and wave to her. And she smiled, and she waved back. And after many years, when they grew up, Shmuley and the rabbi's daughter got married. And they lived, as we all should, in peace and prosperity all the rest of their days. Well, this final story also has some roots in the Jewish tradition and even in the Christian tradition. It's another story about how an unlikely hero overcomes great adversity. There was once a kingdom in which every king in that kingdom allowed their subjects to worship as they would, and the peoples in that kingdom lived in peace and prosperity for many, many years. But it came time when the old king died, and his son came to the throne. Now this new king was insecure, and he wanted to test his power over his people. And so his very first decree was that all of the people should become the same religion as he did, and to worship as he did. And all the people in the kingdom complied, except for the Jews. They alone of all the people would not change. The king was enraged. Who are these Jewish people that they do not obey me? I should have them all killed. But he knew that he couldn't kill them or destroy them, because if he did, the other people in the kingdom might rise up to help the Jews. And he couldn't just send them away. He had to conceive of a plan. And he did. He conceived of a very clever plan. He called the Jewish people to him, the Jewish leaders, into the palace. And as they assembled in the throne room, he said to the Jewish people, or the leaders, "You're a stubborn people. I would like you to leave my kingdom, but just so that you don't think I'm entirely heartless and cruel, I'm going to give you a test. I'm going to have a debate with you. Come back in 1 week's time. Choose someone among you to debate me. I will give him 3 questions. And if you can answer them to my satisfaction, the Jewish people can stay in this village, in this kingdom. Otherwise, you'll have to leave. And the debate will be in sign language." Well, the Jewish leaders went back to the synagogue, and they didn't know what to do. I mean, this was their home. They had lived there all their lives. They raised their children here. Their ancestors were buried in the kingdom. Where would they go? For 3 days, they fasted and they prayed. And for another 3 days, the Jewish leaders argued and pleaded. But on the 7th day, they still were no closer to finding someone to debate the king than they had been in the beginning. Now, in this village, in this Jewish village, there lived a woman named Rachel. Rachel was old and poor and uneducated. She raised chickens and she sold the eggs in the marketplace. Every day she would come to the minyan, the morning prayers at the synagogue, and she would bring eggs for the men who came to pray in the morning. And 3 times a week she would go to the palace and bring eggs to the king and his family. And so it was that she heard the men fasting and praying, and she heard the men arguing and pleading. And when she came to the 7th day, she said to the men, "Nu, have you found somebody to debate the king?" And the men said that they had not. And Rachel said, "Well, you know what? I have known the king all of his life. I've known him as a little boy. I knew his father, I knew his mother, I know his wife and his children. Maybe I can go and I can talk some sense into him. Maybe I can change his mind." And the Jewish leaders didn't want to do that, so they argued some more, they prayed some more, they pleaded some more, but when no one could be found, it was agreed that Rachel would try to convince the king to change his mind. Rachel picked up her basket of eggs and her favorite chicken, and she put it in the basket. And then she followed the Jewish leaders to the palace. And when they came to the throne room, the king said, "So, have you found someone to debate me?" And the Jewish leaders parted, and Rachel came forward. And she said, "Good afternoon, Your Majesty. How are you today? How's your wife? How's your mother? How are your children doing? You know, I heard your lumbago isn't so good. I brought a chicken. You can make chicken soup. You can have your cooks make chicken soup. Can't hurt." The king stood up and said, "Silence. We are not here to talk about my health. My children are fine. My wife is fine. My mother is fine. We're not here to debate my health. We are here to determine the fate of the Jewish people. Are you ready to debate me?" "Well, to tell you the truth, Your Majesty, could you—" "Silence," he said. "I'm going to give you 3 signs. If you can read them and answer them correctly, the Jewish people can stay and worship as they want." And he reached into a basket that was beside his throne, and he picked up a handful of corn, and he scattered it. He moved the microphone, and he scattered it all over the floor. Rachel looked, and she smiled, and then she nodded, and she picked up her favorite hen, and she set it down on the floor, and pretty soon that chicken began to gobble up all of those corn kernels. "A good answer," said the king. "A very good answer. Here is your next sign." And he pointed 2 fingers at Rachel. Rachel looked at him. She got angry. She put up her fist in front of her face. "Another excellent answer," said the king. "Amazing. Very well, Rachel. If you can answer this last sign correctly, to my satisfaction, your people can stay." And he reached into the folds of his gown, and he pulled out a piece of bread. It was stale, covered with green mold, and he handed it to Rachel. Rachel looked, shook her head, reached into her basket and pulled out an egg. "Another good answer," said the king. "Excellent, excellent. Very well. You can stay. You will not have to leave my kingdom." Well, Rachel picked up her basket and her chicken, and the Jewish men quickly left the palace before the king could change his mind. And when they were gone, the king's advisors gathered around him and said, "That was a very profound debate you just demonstrated. The questions were very astute, and her answers were quite interesting. Could you please explain to me and to us what it is that transpired?" And the king said, "It's amazing. The Jews are so confident. They are so learned that they took an uneducated woman to debate me, a little chicken lady, a little chicken egg seller. I threw corn on the ground to show that the Jewish people were scattered all over the world. Why should I let you stay here in my kingdom? Why can't you go somewhere else?" And she had her hen pick up all of the corn to show that God watches over them no matter where they are, but this is their home. This is where they want to stay. And then I pointed 2 fingers at her to show that there were 2 kings, me, the king here on earth, and the king up in heaven. And she held up her fist to say, "No, there's only one king. We are all one in the hand of God. There's only one king, and his rules and laws must be obeyed above all others." And then I took out a piece of bread to show that the Jewish religion was old and moldy and decaying. And she brought out an egg to say, "No, the Jewish religion is alive. It's always renewing itself. It's always growing." And so I let her stay. I let the Jews stay. Meanwhile, back in the synagogue, all of the Jewish leaders had gathered around Rachel, and they said, "What happened? What did he say? What did you answer? What was the debate about?" And Rachel said, "I don't know. I don't know. I didn't even think he started the debate. It was almost over. I was going to ask him if he changed his mind when he threw corn on the ground. So I figured maybe he wanted the chicken soup after all. And I set the chicken down on the ground to eat up the corn to make it nice and fat for his chicken soup." But I guess that was the wrong answer, because then he got angry and he was going to poke my eyes out. I put up my fist to show him I might be an old woman, but I'd knock his lights out if he tried to hit me or tried to touch me. And then I guess he got hungry. So he took out his lunch, and I took out mine. And so it was that the king realized the error of his ways. He rescinded the law and let everybody in his kingdom worship as they would. And they lived happily and in contentment and peace and prosperity for all the days of their life. Thank you. Now, I think we've got a little bit more time left. If anybody would like to ask me some questions about my stories or about storytelling, anything you want to know. If I don't know the answers, I'll just make them up. But anything that you'd like to know.
How long have you been telling stories?
Pardon?
How long have you been telling
I started telling stories to my students. I was at first an elementary school librarian and later a middle school librarian. And I started telling stories to the elementary school. I started telling Halloween stories. And I found that storytelling is very powerful. I can hold 100 middle school kids in the palm of my hand on a Friday afternoon on the night of a full moon after they've just had all kinds of sugared drinks and there's a dance coming up. Because kids, as adults, are interested and fascinated by stories. Yes?
What does muzzle tough mean?
Muzzle tough means good luck. Muzzle is good, muzzle is luck, and tov is good. So it means good luck. So when you say somebody has something good happens, like a new grandchild is born, a new baby's born, or when somebody gets married, you say mazel tov, good luck. You know, it's a greeting of congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes?
Your first song brought back a memory that I had kind of forgotten. We celebrate Lent in the Episcopal Church.
Uh-huh.
We always have speakers. And about 5 years ago, we had a Seder.
Oh,
We
okay.
had the rabbi there. And it was set. It was beautifully done.
Yes.
And it was very, very humbling and interesting.
Okay. Did everybody hear her about the Passover Seder that she had at her church? It was very interesting, and the rabbi came and they sang the song Dayenu.
Yes.
Did you sing it along with them? After a while, it's a very catchy tune, and probably when you leave today, it'll probably be circulating around in your ear. You might not like that. Anybody else? Any other questions? Yes?
Do you mostly do this for young groups or older groups?
I tell stories for all ages, mostly school children, just because that just seems to be the most likely audience. And because I was a librarian, I go into libraries and tell schools there too, tell stories there too, but mostly schools. But I'm just, in fact, I developed a new program. You've got a postcard there, and since I started telling stories, I wanted to tell my mother's story. She came to America during World War II. But by the time I got into storytelling, she had Alzheimer's, and I couldn't ask her questions about her past. So I did some research, and things from my sister remembered, her friends remembered. I created the story about her. And so I tell the story in my mother's voice, in her voice, and a couple other stories about my mother, and give people an opportunity to tell stories about their mothers. So that's my adult program. Yes?
Do you have a short story from your mother that you can share?
No, it's kind of long. No, they're both a little long. You have to have me come to your group, and I'll tell that. They're kind of long. Although my mother was wonderful. She had a German saying about everything. No matter what happened, she always would say, everything is good for something, and this too shall pass. So, and then she'd also say, lange Fädchen, faule Mädchen, long thread, lazy maiden. She was a seamstress, and every time I would sew a hem for it, it would get all tangled up, and she'd say, long thread, lazy maiden. And if I wanted something, she said, you just want a gold cocker, which means somebody who defecates gold. So she had, don't put that on TV. But, there's lots of little stories, that my sister and I share. One of them that's not in my program is when she and my father came to America, they worked in New York as a couple because they couldn't afford housing. And my mother took care of, it was like a nanny, took care of the kids, did some cooking. And my father worked in the subway and sold newspapers and learned English that way. And one day my mother's employer asked her to make a fruit salad for some company that she was having. And so my mother cut up oranges and apples and pears and peaches and whatever. And then she added a can of something that she wasn't familiar with. They didn't have it in Germany. And when she presented the fruit salad, nobody would eat it. And afterwards, the employer came and said, what did you put in the fruit salad? And so she showed her all the apple cores and the orange rinds and all that stuff in the can, which was sweet potatoes. So there's lots of little stories, if you were an immigrant or if your parents were an immigrant, or your grandparents, there are stories about not understanding, the culture that you're coming into. So thank you for asking. Any other questions? Yes?
I'm Greek ancestry, and when I went to Greektown, they would not allow me to have fish and yogurt together.
Really?
I have no idea why, but they were adamant. Everybody in the restaurant, I said, I'm buying it, I can have whatever I want. And I said, you can't. Are there any two foods outside of which you might have to do common that you won't eat together?
Well, a lot of people are kosher, and so they can't mix milk and meat. So that's the main thing that you can't have together. You can't, the Bible says you shouldn't boil the goat in the milk of the mother. So that's sort of where it comes from. And so you can't have a cheeseburger. Or you can have a tofu burger. Or something else. But that's the only restrictions that we have. And there's certain foods that are treif, unkosher, like shellfish and like pork, things like that.
And kosher means what?
Kosher means clean. Right, Eleanor? Yes.
What does that mean?
It means it has to, like a cow or a chicken, has to be killed in a certain way. Usually it is it's like an instant killing, so the animal doesn't suffer. And the blood is taken out of the, animal with salt. And if the cow, you can only eat certain parts of the cow. You can't eat everything. You can't have, I don't think you can have the liver. You can't have the best steaks. You can only have certain steaks and brisket and things like that. But it means a certain ritual killing, that has to be according to laws.
It's not saying that the kitchen has to be clean.
That too, absolutely, yes. I mean, not just clean like you and I would clean, but like on Passover, you have to get rid of everything that's chametz, which is anything that would have any bread or flour in it. You have to clean it. You have to cover have different dishes. You cover your counters and your stove and everything like that, so that it doesn't touch any of the food that you eat during the rest of the year.
Why is that?
Again, this is part of the kosher rules.
The Bible.
I'm sorry, what?
Where did it come from? The Bible?
It came from the Bible for Passover, so in a way to honor Passover and the time when we were slaves in Egypt. So you have that matzah. You're not allowed to have anything leavened, no bread that's leavened, because when we left Egypt, when we were slaves, we were in a hurry and we didn't have time to let the bread rise. So, good. Okay. Well, I hope this program was sufficient. I hope it was enough. And if you'd like to join me in one last chorus of Dayenu, I would love that. Dayenu, 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 Dayenu.